you, good evening, and a very warm welcome to the Hot Seat. My guest this evening is a man who's had an incredible career in commercialdom in Sri Lanka. The man who introduced the supermarket concept, who introduced television to Sri Lanka with the help of a Japanese aide, who played a pivotal role in the founding of the Sri Jayawardhanapura Hospital, saving the Royal Colombo Golf Club, and the list goes on and on. We're delighted to welcome, therefore, Mr. Cornell Hilton Pereira. Good evening, Cornell.
Good evening, Mr. Farah.
And am I right in saying that you are Cornell Hilton Pereira?
Yes. Yes.
The founder of the Hilton Colombo Hotel brought into Sri Lanka an international brand when there was nothing much else. Way back in 83. But you started on the project when?
78, soon
78.
after the change.
At the time that you embarked on this mission to bring an international brand name into the hospitality industry in Sri Lanka, there was hardly anything else. You were, of course, a very a successful entrepreneur by then. What possessed you to go on this mission, almost, to set up the Hilton Hotel?
Well, it was like what the president wanted. We were, few others, including Dr. Wickramaveera Surya, we played a role in convincing then opposition leader Jayawardena to open the economy.
Right.
And if we were not going to take that step, we made it clear that we will end up like Cuba or Burma at that time.
Right. So, very simply, could you describe to me what was the benefits? Well, what was the government's input into this? Did they give you the land free? Did they?
The government didn't give anybody anything free,
right,
but they facilitated by giving land, state land, on lease.
Right.
And they also offered, at that time, I remember President Jayawardena said, they could give 5 state guarantees.
Right.
That's up to 250 million, limited to $50 million.
Right.
And that is to raise the money.
Right.
And everybody had that offer, and he was very interested and keen. If the open market economy was going to work, then new hotels, hospitals, and other facilities like supermarkets had to come in. And it is there that I was interested. Both hotels, supermarkets, because I had seen these things. I lived in Japan. My formative years, university was in Tokyo.
Right.
So I had a desire for these as a schoolboy.
And you could afford it.
Afford?
You could afford to do this project.
No, it was like this. There were several hotels interested that time, and President Jayawardena wanted the international names.
Mm-hmm.
Hilton was one of them, and if you go back in time, you know that Mr. Cyril Gardiner and few others had tried earlier to bring the Hilton in here.
Right.
So President Jayawardena's target first was Hilton, Sheraton, so on and so forth, and he had set aside the Echelon Square for whoever brought Hilton.
Right.
And at that time there were about 26, 27 aspirants who were trying to negotiate and work with Hilton. And Hilton chose to go to bed with me.
At that time,
they made the decision.
Right. And at that time, you didn't. By then, you'd introduced supermarkets to Sri Lanka.
Yes.
And you represented several brands, international names.
Yes, I did.
And so you then embarked. Has it been, at the time, was it merely a good business opportunity? Did you ever dream that it would end up in this odyssey of misadventure?
I never thought. I never expected, but we were safeguarded because we had signed sacrosanct documents, they're all here. Share transfer agreement, investment protection agreement, preliminary agreement, construction agreement. All of them were first class agreements, no second to anything that would have been signed in London or New York, because the lawyers for Hilton, you know they are. The lawyers for Mitsui, they have a big legal field in Mitsui, Irish, American law, all kinds of lawyers. Okay. So the documentation is super. If you had somebody else doing documentation today, it won't be any different to that.
Right. Okay, so you begin.
Yes.
And did you? What was the total price or the cost of the project?
The cost of the project, as I mentioned earlier, it had to be limited to around $50 million because the foreign borrowing, the letters of guarantee to be given by the state was $50 million. We had actually had a plan for 3 towers that would have gone to $75–80 million, and that guarantee was not forthcoming. We were told by the cabinet it's $50 million, and that's how we ended up with 2 towers, while having made all provision to put up the 3rd tower.
Right. So technically this hotel is built in such a way that the foundations can take a 3rd tower.
Oh yes, any time now. Right. We've considered that several times. It is because of the mean, nasty interference of the state.
Okay, we'll come to that, but I'm just trying to go in step by step. So you had a $50 million project, and how much of that were you going to put in?
No, now this I'll have to explain to you. From 1978, I started working on this.
Right.
And in 79–80, it was going to be decided who Hilton was going to choose. So I took the risk. I have a list of all the items that I've spent on.
But finally, when it was time to award the contract to the contractors,
yes,
by then you must have set up the company.
Yes, I had committed myself in my own cash to about $2 million, and through my Japanese friend for the final drawings $3 million. If we hadn't gone.
Okay, we'll take a break on that. We'll come back to discuss the funding of the Colombo Hilton project. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the hot seat, where our guest tonight is Colonel Hilton Pereira. This is part 1 of 2 programs. Mr. Pereira, we were talking before the break about your shareholding and about your contribution as the promoter of the project. What percentage of the company did you save for yourself? What was your shareholding?
My shareholding was 56%. How it happened.
Okay. So 56%.
How did it come?
Yes.
Let me explain it to you.
Yeah.
From 1978 up to 1981, all the risks and monies were mine.
Right.
As I mentioned earlier, there were 26 aspirants trying to get hold of Hilton.
Yeah.
Hilton finally chose me, and to do that, I had to take my Japanese architects across to the US, up and back several times, and that was all on those days Pan American, and they were not flying economy class.
Right.
All those monies were expended by me.
And as the promoter of the project?
As a promoter, I took a chance, because if Hilton chose, let's say, Gardiner,
so we understand that bit.
That was a risk.
Yes.
So
you capitalized your
capitalized expenses. As early as 1980.
Yeah.
Cornell and Company signed up with Hilton.
Right.
Hilton chose Cornell and Company,
not
the government.
So you had 56%.
Yeah.
Who had the balance 44%?
The balance was 27%. Actually, it was 25%. The government then decided the foreign holdings should not exceed 25%, and Mitsui Taisei had this 25%. However, because there was an unsold portion of shares, then it became 27 for them. My 51 became 56.
Right.
And,
okay, so they had
not
27.
just that, all these monies were spent by me and me alone.
That's right. Point taken. So we have 56% and 27% to the Japanese.
Yes.
That makes it 83.
Yes.
What of the other 17?
Others, let me explain this very clearly. When we were trying to negotiate the loan into dollars.
No, but just a moment. That came later.
No, it is coming now. Let me explain it to you. Rescheduling in dollars or reducing something so on was the idea we had, because that was a heavy JVP time, if you know 83.
Yes, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Chair.
1 second, sir. Then Mr. Paskarlingam said, we will put 40 million rupees goodwill money for the Japanese to renegotiate the loan. And I said at that time, we don't want to have to...
I'm going to have to stop you there, because I'm asking you about the shareholding at the outset. The loans and so on, and Paskarlingam and so on came later, after the hotel was built even. But at the beginning, on day one, you had 56%, the Japanese had 27%.
No, day one, 51%, and they had 25%.
Okay.
The unsold shares, it was difficult.
All right, on day one, who else had these other shares?
Day one, I had given some shares to Mr. Amarasekara, Halsari, 100,000 gratis. Mr. Ricky,
he was at the time an employee of Cornell and Company.
Cornell and Company, yes.
Right. What was he?
He was an accountant.
He was an accountant, right, okay. So he had some shares.
Yes.
And who else?
Mr. Ricky Mendes, Delmage, he bought his own shares.
Right. Okay.
And the others were the small-time shareholders.
Because it was, you had
it didn't all sell. It was difficult times.
Okay, so it was listed.
Listed, yes.
Right. So the balance was out on the market.
Market, yes.
Right. So you gave Mr. Amarasekara some free shares.
Yes, 100,000 shares
of some other transaction, and Mr. Ricky Mendes had he paid for his
own shares. He bought his own shares.
Right. Did you allocate any shares to any politician?
No.
No.
No, sir. No politician.
You didn't front run for anyone?
No.
No.
Politicians had no interest at that time.
But it was something out of nothing. They would have jumped at the idea.
No, but that was
you didn't. Fine. Okay. So now the project's going on. So it's 51 million.
51% because the then minister insisted that 51% must be
about
owned by the
total investment, 51 million.
51 million. We had to limit the project to $51 million.
Right. So the project, what happened in 1983? Had you signed up by then?
I had signed up with Hilton. We were partners by then, because I said 1980 we signed up.
Yeah.
Management agreement between us and Hilton. Yeah. By the way, Hilton are operators. Yeah. They are not investors. Except at that time in Tokyo, they had never invested anywhere. They don't. All these guys are managers, operators. They don't take any risk. They don't take any chance.
Right. So things were happening.
Things are happening.
Colombo was on fire.
83, it was on fire. That's right.
And the Japanese arrived on the day that there were bombs going off?
Yes. Actually, we were having a conference at the BMICH.
Right.
When I got a call from Mr. Manik Divella, I was inside there, Mr. Chandi Shanmugam was talking. He said, just walk out of the building, look out. And I saw fire all over. And then we had to abandon.
Did you get the feeling that your dreams of this project had gone up in the smoke?
Yes, very true. It was so sad. I had invested so much. I signed up with Hilton. We were just about to go. I risked so many things.
How did you persuade the Japanese to come back? Or to not go back?
Well, I did them a big favor. I introduced them to Hilton.
Right.
I say, the contractor.
Right.
And through that introduction, this contractor, Taisei, got the construction agreement signed up with Hilton.
Right.
That just happened, was a favor. I did them. And
did you represent Taisei?
No, I was working with Mitsui and Company. First started with Seito, they gave up, went to somebody else. No one was interested after 83 July. But we, anyway, worked with Mitsui. Their partners were Taisei. Taisei is one of the, at that time, among the 3 top contractors. Mm-hmm. And we had this joint venture, Mitsui, Taisei. Mitsui never done any construction before.
Mm. So the hotel opens in 1987.
Right.
And it opens on your birthday.
On my birthday, yes.
Because President Jayawardena declined to open it on his birthday, which was sometime a bit earlier, and suggested that you, in your honor.
Yes. As a marker, I think he was a statesman, gratitude.
1987.
1987. I'm 11 September, where the Twin Towers were 9/11 man.
Okay.
President Jayawardena was 17th.
So it opens and it does well.
It does very well for
up to
for
how
that
long?
time.
When did the troubles start?
Well, the troubles were on then. The JVP was on.
I don't mean that. I mean the troubles within your company and so on.
Oh, okay. We had this Mr. Nihal Sri Amarasekara, while he was on the board and with us, filed a case.
No, I must say this to you.
Yeah.
We're trying not to discuss Mr. Amarasekara.
Yeah.
However,
yeah.
When you have done so, you must bear full responsibility.
I take full responsibility for every statement that I make here.
Okay.
Because I'm the one who...
Let's try and keep this story to be part of
right.
the Hilton story. And whilst Mr. Amarasekara is also part of that story, he is only a insignificant shareholder in terms of your shareholding, or at the time. So, when did the trouble start?
The trouble started when, actually the real big trouble started after the change of regime.
Right.
After the UNP.
Yeah.
Changed to the Sri Lanka Freedom Party.
Yeah. Let's take a break and come back to exactly when the trouble started for the Colombo Hilton. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome back to the Hot Seat with Mr. Cornel Pereira, the founder of the Colombo Hilton Hotel. Mr. Pereira, tell us, when did the trouble start? Was it in 1994?
Yes, soon after the change of government to the Sri Lanka.
So would it be fair to say that you enjoyed the political patronage of the United National Party and,
of course
that
I did.
government, and that when the government changed and when Mrs. Kumaratunga came into power in 1994, that is when your trouble started?
Trouble started real fast. I even have a letter here to show that I receive a letter from the executive not properly dated. It only gives a month and the year.
Right.
That's hurriedly done. I know.
What does that letter say?
Oh, so and so, all the changes, the board, straight away.
Okay.
But more than that, I already knew.
But you were on the board anyway.
I was, of course, on the board.
Majority.
Majority shareholder. I was chairman.
Yeah.
And it was addressed to me, and how the board had to be changed.
And how were your finances looking 7 years after the hotel had opened? The occupancy was how much?
The occupancy was like 30, sometimes 40.
So Sri Lanka was suffering because of
two wars going on.
Yes.
2 wars, JVP and the other one.
So how was your finances taken?
Finance was very difficult. We were not able to service the loan. But however, every year Hilton made operational profits. Every year their profits were way above the turnover of the other hotels.
Right.
That I remember very well. But trouble began in 94 when the change took place, And soon I realized I was summoned as witness for the state. I was summoned as witness for the state on the story of missing floors, Hilton.
There was a claim that the Hilton project was missing 2 floors.
2 floors or 3 floors. Once when a political meeting, there's 3 floors missing.
Right.
2 floors missing. And
so that was the start of your troubles.
My trouble, and I was summoned as a witness for the state to support this story.
Right.
And soon I realized there were 2 targets, not me. One was Mr. Paskaralingam, one was Mr. Choksi.
Can I make this clear?
Yeah.
When the project started with the $51 million project,
yes,
the government gave a state guarantee, a sovereign guarantee, to the Japanese in favor of the Japanese contractors, that in the event that HDL, the company, couldn't pay or wouldn't pay, the government would make good that payment.
Yes.
Right. In exchange for that state guarantee, you gave your shares as a lien to the government.
Yes.
And so did the Japanese with the 27%?
It's very unfortunate. They were not keen on the project at all. Can you blame them? After 83 July, they saw fire burning outside, they bolted.
But that 27% of those shares, were they on lien to the government too?
No, they were not. I had
only your 50%.
Yes, it was to be 34 from me and 17 from the Japanese to make 51.
Right. Okay.
But they were pussyfooting around because I can't blame them. After 83 July, who wanted to come here?
Mr. Cornel Pereira, thank you very much for being in the hot seat. Next week, we shall discuss the second and final part of the Hilton story with Cornel Pereira. Join us next week.